Hey, Gary.
Yes,
What do you
sir.
do to improve your jiu-jitsu off the mat?
I like to review. And the way I do that is if I go to a seminar, usually 50% of it falls out of my head and I can't remember anything. So I like to go back and review those seminars at a later date.
Yeah, I wish there was a easy way to retain some of that information, whether we are in a class or a seminar, particularly seminar when they are longer and more complex. There's more layers as the instructors are showing techniques. I wish there was a way so we can go back and review all the details. Is there?
Yeah, I think there is. And the way I do it is RŌL TV. Tons of stuff to review. And it's really a great platform for anything you need.
We've built this platform for over 2 years now, over 500 videos, anywhere between techniques, expert lessons, and we have huge guests like Christian Woodman C and Sophia McDormand and many others. And then also all the live events recorded at the Academy are fully available on RŌL TV. So if you're looking to improve your jiu-jitsu or you're looking to review things from the class or seminar, RŌL TV is a perfect platform for you to gain access to. Go to RŌLAcademy.tv, create your account, gain the access, and continue your jiu-jitsu journey.
Yeah, check it out. It works wonders. On this episode of RŌL Radio, we have former child grappling prodigy, Rhode Island College wrestling standout, and BJJ Black Belt under Regis Lebre, Michael Trasso. Listen as Michael shares his outlook on the wrestling grind, from pushing past injuries, cutting weight, and what it takes to be a top-level competitor in both wrestling and BJJ. Here's RŌL Radio with four-time New England Wrestling Association Conference medalist and creator of The Merge, the wrestling guide for jiu-jitsu, Michael Trasso.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we're live. Gary, how are you?
I'm great. I just want to take a quick second to remind everybody about the survey at the
What
RŌL
survey?
Radio.
What are you
The Do You Wash Your Belt survey at therolradio.com/belt. Check it out. The reason you want to check it out is because we now have an exclusive gi giveaway monthly with Fuji Sports, which I think is incredible. So definitely go check it out, therolradio.com/belt, and take the survey. Once you're entered, once you take the survey, you're automatically entered into the giveaway. And like I said, it'll be monthly, and all the rules are there at the site. So definitely check it out.
What's interesting about the whole thing, the results are actually posted on the site as well. So the results might surprise you as we follow this dilemma unfolding in front of our eyes. But let's get to the show. We have Michael Trasso on the show. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for stopping by. And I know you're a good friend of Gianni Grippo. So we talked to Gianni a few weeks ago before New Year's, and you guys known each other for a while, huh?
Yeah. Gianni and I date back to, probably 8, 9, 10 years old, competing. So it's been a long time, long history.
Long history. Long history.
Are you guys? You guys are training together now too, right? Or back together at this point?
Yes, we are. We're training in Hoboken right now.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's for awesome. You. That's awesome. So how are things going for you? I mean, you have a long history of competition, martial arts in general, jiu-jitsu, which we'll talk about, but mostly wrestling. And I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation because you're one of those few individuals out there who dipped his toes into wrestling competitively on a very high competition level. And then also you were quite successful with your jiu-jitsu competition career. So give us a little background. How all this started, where this is all coming from.
Yeah, so it's a really long story. So I'll go through it here and feel free to jump in and ask any questions you want along the way. So, but no, the journey started back in when I was 5 years old. And I think what really sparked it was I was a extremely shy child, extremely shy kid. And my pre-K or my kindergarten teacher actually recommended to my parents, hey, to help him kind of come out of his shell and maybe open up a little bit, why don't you look into, getting him into some kind of sport, right? At the same time, I think just from my father putting it on, I was very into Bruce Lee as well, right? As a 5-year-old or so,
Yep.
I was very interested in Bruce Lee and some kind of martial arts. So my dad put 2 and 2 together and figured, hey, why not try and push him into some kind of martial art, right? And choose that as the sport of choice. So it really began. I have to thank my kindergarten teacher, right, for initially lighting that spark, which caused my father and I to shop around to different martial arts. And we looked into karate, taekwondo. We looked into a few martial arts, but I remember very vividly going to Rising Sun Martial Arts in my hometown of Lyndhurst. And that is where we got introduced to the idea of jiu-jitsu. And initially the style that my first instructor, Jerry Jones, or I'll say Mr. Jones, it was kind of a mixture of sambo, catch wrestling, Japanese jiu-jitsu, mainly being more just like a no-gi style, even though we trained gi as well. And his conversation with my father was more along the lines of, hey, if he ever gets into a fight or a self-defense situation, most statistically proven, especially since he worked with some of the police officers as well, was that 90-95% of fights end up on the ground. So it is very beneficial to train yourself and get yourself well-rounded in an art that requires self-defense if you do get taken to the ground.
So this is what year is this? Just to paint a timeline.
So 1995, when I was 5 years old.
1995. Is this a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy, or this is kind of different arts together? Just kind of as a picture, what are you introduced to?
Yeah, so it really was more of a mixture or a hybrid. So Mr. Jones kind of trained under, it was even some Hapkido involved. So Hapkido, Sambo, a little bit of wrestling, freestyle jiu-jitsu. And when I say freestyle jiu-jitsu, right, not the typical Brazilian jiu-jitsu or the root of actual Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but a lot of the techniques kind of crossed or were very similar. So it was a hybrid. It wasn't specifically Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and the main reason why I'm asking, because in early 90s or mid 90s, jiu-jitsu really wasn't that present yet, right? It was the very beginning of what we know here in US as jiu-jitsu or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, even Japanese jiu-jitsu. So it's always interesting to hear the stories that even in early 90s, there were academies or dojos, whatever the format was, teaching the arts of what we know, something very similar to it, at least.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it was very, I will say, it was well-rounded in regards to, takedowns and top game and bottom game. But I'd say a large portion of it was really that mindset of, staying on top, being on top, winning on top, right? We did go over some, bottom techniques as well, but I think just coming from that catch wrestling background, it was definitely heavily skewed towards the top game.
So is that what introduced the transition into your wrestling competition career later on?
So I believe that was definitely part of it, was involved in that. But I think it was also the recommendation just from other instructors and other friends saying, hey, to my father and I, but hey, Michael's catching on very quickly to, this art per se, but where there's no specific niche just to takedowns for this, for example, right? So if you can get yourself well versed in takedowns, which as we all know, wrestling just gives you great overall body awareness, body control in general. Maybe that can add to the jiu-jitsu game. So I think it was just more of a recommendation of others I knew saying, "Hey, my son does wrestling. Maybe wrestling will help your jiu-jitsu game."
And how was that transition?
It was very different. I actually have a funny story, at least to me, right? That I don't remember how old I was, to be honest. Definitely was middle school when I first was, I first got into or tried wrestling. But I went to the Lyndhurst rec program, and at that time, per se, I was achieving some accolades in jiu-jitsu, right? And I think between my coach, my father talking to the coaches, he was kind of just telling like, oh, hey, my son does jiu-jitsu. He's pretty good, whatever it is. Trying to get into some kind of wrestling, and I think they took that as like, okay, this guy's probably pretty good at wrestling, so let's try and test him against one of our like really good rec wrestlers. And they put us standing up facing each other, and they basically were like, all right, go, like, wrestle. And the kid wound up like just immediately double legged me within like 3 seconds, right to my back. And I kind of just like wrapped my legs around my guard. And they're just like looking at my back, like, what is this guy doing? But I remember that because I'm like, hey, I don't really know wrestling. That's why I'm here. But I think they took jujitsu as like, oh, he also wrestles. And it's like, no, I don't wrestle.
I'm laughing, but that's a pretty common scene at every academy when the wrestling person or person with wrestling background comes in and for the first time is sparring with like pure jiu-jitsu guys, they stand up and then about 3 seconds later, there's double leg or single leg and the other person is in the guard and it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember in class here, a brand new white belt. I was just a blue belt, just turned to a blue belt. And I got destroyed. And there was another black belt on the mat. And as soon as the bell rang, the black belt looked at the white belt and said, "Where'd you wrestle in college?" And, and I was like, I don't feel quite so bad now, you know?
Yeah, that is very common. I find it in a jiu-jitsu space, as you mentioned, right? Wrestlers coming in or, I think there's that different level or different upper echelon of, hey, like I know, I'm not saying it in a disrespectful way towards the jiu-jitsu community, but there's like the jiu-jitsu wrestling and then the wrestling,
Well, but I think what's important to identify, now we are deviating from your story, but what's important to identify here, that wrestling has a very different objective than jiu-jitsu does. And if you look at all the disciplines, all arts, no matter what they are, judo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, sambo, whatever, they all have different rule set and a different goal behind them, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but in wrestling, the goal essentially is to take somebody down and hold them down, stay on top. That's the general rule of thumb, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the end goal is obviously to pin them, just like they'll be submitting for jiu-jitsu. But to your point, yes, that is correct.
Right. Versus in jiu-jitsu, we don't care. We top, bottom, upside down, flying, and all the other things.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more dynamic, right? It would introduce its own disadvantages, but the dynamics and goals are slightly different.
Yes. Yep.
So as all this is unfolding, you start wrestling, and after your interesting first experience on the wrestling mat, you keep coming back for more. Why?
Well, at that time, I, being as young as I was, I did see the value, right, of adding wrestling into my game and kind of making that full circle art of, hey, I can learn wrestling and learn takedowns and be able to control the fight and control the pace from that perspective. And then, having the ability to also submit my opponent and control him for the mat. So I saw the value in kind of adding both together and kind of running with both at that point.
So how old are you at that point?
Middle school. I mean, yeah, I'd probably say at that point, you're probably, what is that? Like 9 years old, 10 years old. Yeah.
So are you really making those identifications by yourself, or this is your dad is saying, hey, listen, this is what we're going to do. He has a plan for you.
Well, it's definitely inspired and started from my father. He brought the idea up to me, and that's when I was like, yeah, let's try it out. Let's go try wrestling. I also think I liked it, right? Because just being on the mat, it's something that you just enjoy once you start getting into those mat sports, right? But no, he definitely was a key element in presenting ideas to me, laying out the pros and cons, and then making sure that he supported me if I wanted to stick with it. So
you're going through your teens and you're competing more and more and more, and this turns into a quite a bit of competition aspect in your life, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, at that point, let's say even fast forwarding to maybe like towards the latter part of middle school to the high school area. I mean, it's been almost 10 plus years. And at that point, training in, jiu-jitsu as a whole, right? And then wrestling and following it through the high school to high school wrestling as well. And this is where it can go a couple avenues, this conversation, right? Because there's a lot happening at this point. When I, around 13 years old, 2003, as I already, have that, I already have that knack for wrestling now. I'm trying to continue with that. I was competing out at the NAGA, I believe, NAGA Las Vegas tournament. And that is when, so Brian Simmons was the president of Grapplers Quest, and small world, right? Brian Simmons, actually, we trained together in New Jersey when I first started jiu-jitsu. He was like a white belt or blue belt. So small world, fast forward, he winds up making Grapplers Quest. But we sat down out there, my father, Brian Simmons, and I, we were kind of chit-chatting on the side of the mat, I think after I competed. And he said, hey, I know you guys are looking to possibly expand and, look into a new art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because that time my father was chatting with me of, hey, we've done 9 years or so here from the catch wrestling and freestyle Jiu-Jitsu perspective. This Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu thing seems to be, a different light or a different perspective, and maybe expand more on your bottom game. And that would be a good thing to throw into your game as well. So Brian Simmons at the tournament introduced us to Mike Markulik, who would eventually be my next instructor as I began my journey into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I just want to segue into that, because that's, yeah.
So it sounds like this was the pivot point, or where the, I guess, more traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu aspect in your life begins, while you kind of transition in between those two.
Yes. Yeah. So about 1995 to 2003 was really just that freestyle hybrid jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2003 was when I was introduced to Mike Markulik, who was at the time, actually, he was a brown belt under Royler Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
He actually wasn't even a black belt yet. But I know he was kind of one of the few true Americans from the original Gracie who might have Brazil. And yeah, that journey began in 2003 of strictly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and then wrestling on the side.
Well, even in early 2000s, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not that present. Like, I even know from my history, that's very early on in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu history as far as here in the U.S. So that all makes sense. Listen, let's talk about a little bit more about the wrestling before we move on to your Jiu-Jitsu career and Jiu-Jitsu time. And correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm always curious about this, but isn't it wrestling kind of part of culture, the competition aspect of it? So is it even possible to do wrestling without competition?
It's very tough. It'd be very tough, right? I mean, I think, as I was going back and kind of looking at it, even just differences between jiu-jitsu, right, with wrestling. Yeah, wrestling's a very competitive nature. I think there are some big differences from jiu-jitsu in that aspect.
Is that part of the reasoning, the aggressive, and I might be pissing off a lot of wrestlers right now, but that aggressive approach when it comes to the grappling? Let's just say that both jiu-jitsu and wrestling, just put it in one kind of bucket. It's all grappling, right? Different forms. But is that a reasoning behind that more aggressive approach, always attack, always move, constantly change angles, constantly change levels?
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting you said, because the history of wrestling, not that I'm an expert on the history of wrestling, from many, many hundreds of years ago, but I've always been kind of taught, and I've always heard, and I think you hear from 99% of coaches and just wrestling programs in general, it's a more kind of in-your-face, high-paced, as you're mentioning, more brutal, hands-on approach, and just overall, roughness and toughness kind of sport. And I think one thing that does play a role into that, besides the, as one of my friends would joke, he would joke around and say AMS, which is alpha male syndrome, which isn't really a thing, right? But I think one thing that plays a role with wrestling is the periods, right? So in jiu-jitsu we have just one period, right, per se, one period where it's 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes for brown or whatever, and 10 minutes for black belts. With wrestling, some folks understand that if I told you and I were going to go live right now for 2 minutes, I mean, that's really not that much time, right? I mean, some people spend 2 minutes. Yeah, some people spend 2 minutes trying to break open guard or pass half guard. So with wrestling, you have these periods where, and it changes depending on middle school, high school, college, but college level, right? Or even not college level. Sorry, let's go back to even middle school, right? I think it's 1-1-1, or like 1 minute and 30 seconds, and maybe another minute and 30 seconds. High school, I think, is 2-2-2.
Yeah, so you don't have a choice, right?
Yeah, you don't really have a choice. You have to pick up the pace, and you have to look at it from a perspective of,
I'm sorry, but jiu-jitsu guy would just pull the guard and it would sit there for 2 minutes. It would reset and sit there for another 2 minutes.
That would totally happen. But yeah, I think that's one of the big reasons why. Because at the end of the day, you could make up for the points in regards to, hey, I'm down by 2 points, I got to score again. But when a period's over, you kind of have to just move past it. And you already lost that period. Now you only have 2 left. So I think it's just a mentality of shorter periods. Multiple periods just makes you pick up the pace quicker.
But isn't so that approach in sport, right? Constant go and a very physical grind, if you will. And I know that translates directly into training. Like, I know how you guys train. I mean, there's nothing fun about wrestling training. I don't care what anybody says, right? But does that grind translates into wear and tear, particularly when you look at this from a perspective starting, just like yourself, starting at age of 5 or age of 10, wherever that point is different for different people. But like, if you wrestle for 10 years straight, and some wrestle even more, how in the world does that translate to wear and tear on your body?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely an interesting topic, because wrestling is definitely very heavy on the body, right? And I think the obvious, I'll go through the obvious first before I get into the non-obvious, but one of the obvious things is, besides injury prevention, is also just taking care of your body, right? And that's hard, because I was actually having this conversation maybe a few weeks ago with someone, talking about old injuries that I still nurse, that still kind of come back and creak, and I feel like I'm like 60 already. But I was talking about like, I can go back.
You not believe me? Ask Gary. Gary's.
I was waiting for Thomas to open his mouth. 60's right around the corner for me.
You're not 60.
But yeah, I was having this conversation with someone, and I was saying how, if I could go back in time, I probably would have, or a specific tournament, a specific injury, I probably would have taken more time off and been a little smarter. And I wouldn't have had that long-term injury. And I quickly thought, and I'm like, actually, you know what? I probably wouldn't have done it if I went back. I probably done the same exact thing, right? It's hard as athletes, and it's hard as competitors, and even just a wrestler in general, I think, just because you're taught, and I'm not saying this is the right thing, right? Because I think there's these coaches that believe in pushing through injuries, and I think that's a certain level and a different conversation. But you're just kind of taught to suck it up, push through the pain, and move forward a lot, regardless of how bad it hurts. And I think to some scale, that's okay. I think mental toughness is probably 90% of competing anyway. But there's that level of, okay, I'm really hurt, and I need to take some time off. Or, hey, I need to push through and compete because I want this medal, or I need to place, I need to qualify for nationals. So long story short,
you're talking about aches and pains versus true injuries, right? I mean,
exactly.
My judo coach said there's a difference between playing hurt and playing injured. And when you're injured, you're done. You're off the mat, and if you're hurt, well, that's the time to like power through it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it is. I think that's one of the reasons why long-term injuries do happen. Like, for example, I've been very lucky, I have to say. My senior year, the start of my senior year, I bumped up a weight class. I was still cutting a decent amount of weight, but I bumped up a weight class, and my first dual meet, I did really well. It was very dominant. But within a few days later, I started feeling very strange and a pain in my chest and my shoulder, which wound up leading to my neck to hurt. And I wound up getting a stinger the next day in practice, which is probably one of the worst feelings ever. I don't know if you ever had a stinger, but and I wound up going to see the doctor. And long story short, they're like, hey, you have 3 bulged discs in your neck. It's impinging on your, there's an impingement. That soon followed by muscle atrophy, where it was even just visibly noticeable. Like, I looked normal here, and this arm and my chest was almost deflated. And it came to the point of like, hey, like, I'm a senior captain. It's my senior year, so this is my last year competing. They kind of recommended, hey, I think you should take the season off. And I wasn't having that, right? I'm not going to take off my last season. So I think luckily, looking at it now, I've had some small things pop up with that area, but nothing detrimental that's been life-changing for me. But I think some people it has been. I know folks that have pushed through shoulder injuries and their shoulders never been the same. So I think that's just the wrestling mentality and kind of what we're taught, and just the will to compete and how bad you also want it as a person, which is different from everyone, really does kind of sometimes hurt us in the long run from that side.
So how is that compared to jiu-jitsu?
I think it's to give one similarity. I think jiu-jitsu folks, or really anyone in any sport, have the love for a sport that want to continue pushing through injuries or even just hurting, right? If it's not really a true injury. But I think difference-wise, do you mean difference-wise just in regards to injuries, or what specifically?
Just in the methods of training, right? I mean, because everything that I'm hearing from you right now, it's push hard. You even said it yourself. Listen, we recommend you to sit out. This is not a smart thing to do. And you say, no. Next answer, or next recommendation, because that's not happening. And I've been there myself, right?
Yeah.
But you know, how is that compared to jiu-jitsu? Because it sounds to me like it's a very different mentality, very different approach culture-wise. It's not the decision we make differently, but it's just is embedded differently from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I'm thinking about this now in my head with the differences. I mean, jiu-jitsu, and I think martial arts in general, right? And it has this cliche, and I don't mean cliche in a negative way. I think it's a good thing or a cool thing that, you know, the gentle art is the jiu-jitsu cliche kind of, right? That's who we are, the gentle art. But I know some folks joke around about it's like, it's not the gentle art. But I think we're taught from an early stage of, hey, if you're really efficient in a martial art or jiu-jitsu, right, you can easily handle your opponent or beat an opponent, possibly even much bigger than you, with just finesse, right? And not using this crazy amount of aggression, right? I mean, even looking back at like the Gracie challenges, stuff like that, right? They quickly showed that you can kind of use a smaller individual to defeat larger opponents without being, you know, this crazy berserk aggressive person. But I think from an early age we're taught that, and I think that's a big difference. Where jiu-jitsu perspective, it's like, hey, you know, calm down. You know, we'll slap bump. It's more of like a friendly environment. We're not going too crazy over here, and focus less on energy and strength, and focus more on just the flow and the technique. Right? When wrestling from an early age, you're taught like, hey, it's kill or be killed. Like, you know,
right?
yeah, exactly. And I think that's a huge difference. Just how the idea is brought up to you, because from an early age, if you told me, hey, jiu-jitsu depends on how crazy and aggressive and, you know, tough you are, and how, you know, how hard you're gonna hand fight with someone and hit them in the face, that's how you're gonna grow up to learn it, right? So it's interesting how the philosophies are a little bit different. When wrestling's, you know, kill or be killed, and jiu-jitsu is more like, hey, let's in a finesse way disassemble our opponent.
Well, and I'm sure that translates also into the way how you train, right? Not only the competition, but also the training approach.
Yes, yeah, it definitely is different, right? And I think one of the differences too, and reel me in here if I'm getting off track, but I think one of the differences to what you're saying regarding training is in jiu-jitsu, you know, there's multiple people, there's multiple athletes, there's multiple competitors from a school that can fight in the same weight class, right? It's the IBJJ efforts, the tournament. It's a tournament's responsibility to kind of split them up and put them maybe on opposite sides of the brackets. Mm-hmm. When you're wrestling in high school or college, there's one spot, and you know, you can have your drill partner who's the same weight as you, or one of your friends in the team, and it could be 3, 4, 5 people deep. But really, the starter is the guy that's out there shining and wrestling every match, right? So I think the difference with jiu-jitsu is there isn't that pressure of, hey, I can't go compete at this tournament because this guy's better than me.
You're saying. I was wondering where you're going with this. I get it now. So essentially, yeah, if you don't perform, you're number 2 or 3 or 5, which none of them matter. The number 1 only matters, right? The starter, that's the guy that everybody's looking at. So if you want to be the starter, make it happen.
Yeah, in jiu-jitsu, you're going either way. But
yeah,
sports, you know,
exactly.
If you're not the starting guard, you're not the starting guard. You're sitting on the bench in football, right? So I think that's kind of the different mindset.
See, this all explains why you wrestling guys are so angry all the time. Everything's coming together,
right?
Hey, we're really nice though. Once we weigh in and we eat, and off season.
we gotta talk about that, Gary.
Yeah, well, that's one thing I've always, you know, since high school. I didn't wrestle in high school, but I had a couple friends that were on the team, and that was the first time I ever saw anybody cutting weight. You know, and that's at 14 through 18. And I was just like, you know, I'm in my regular PE class, you know, shooting hoops or whatever. And here comes Jim running by in what looks like a hefty bag. And he's, you know, and just the sweat's pouring off of him. And I don't, you know, I know you have cut weight in the past. I don't know if it was a big deal for you or not, but what does that do to you physically after, you know, or during and after? And what does it do to you mentally as you're going through it? And then more importantly, like afterwards, when you know you got to go through it again when the next tournament's coming up.
So, Michael, before you answer the question, I want to ask you one prior to that quickly.
Okay.
What does weight cutting look like? Because the reason why I'm asking this, a lot of guys who are listening from jiu-jitsu perspective, they don't cut weight. They don't even have clue what weight cutting. I mean, they get a concept, but I don't think they understand the process of cutting weight. So before you answer Gary's question, can you just quickly go through it? What does it look like?
So my answer changes when I'm older now, because I realized years ago I would have said, hey, I cut weight the right way, which still wasn't as bad as some friends I've known. But as I got older, I realized I probably could have done it a little smarter. But what does real weight cutting look like? I think especially at a high level of like college wrestling, I mean, the weight fluctuation is real, because sometimes we don't know how to keep the weight off, and we have a lot, we have our cheat meals after we weigh in. But I mean, easily, I see a lot of college wrestlers cutting easily 20, 25, sometimes 30 plus pounds.
Holy crap.
In what time frame? What are we talking about?
So, I mean, for me personally, and my teammates that I knew, I mean, month and a half, 2 months. Some would start out further. Some would wait 3 weeks, a month before losing that amount of weight.
Yeah.
But I guess to go into just weight cutting in general, right? What it does to you, and my experience with it, because I will tell you, I was fortunate, and once again from my father advised me when I was younger. Middle school. You get kids that start cutting weight in middle school, which I think is crazy, because growth stunting and that kind of stuff, just overall health.
Mm-hmm.
But high school, I didn't really cut too much weight in high school at all. I really kind of wrestled where I was at, and of course, when you're working out with these grueling workouts every day, you're losing a ton of weight, so you kind of naturally drop a weight class anyway once practice season starts. But from a college perspective, my freshman year, so my freshman, my sophomore, my junior year, I wrestled 141 pounds. My freshman year, I was probably like 151, 152 going into the season. My sophomore year, I was like 165. And then my junior year was my worst weight cut ever. My junior year, I was like 180 in the beginning of the season, and I cut down to 141. That was not fun.
I can imagine.
Now you can answer Gary's question.
I don't remember what it was.
The impact.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely mentally and physically. What's the impact? What's the toll?
Oh geez. I mean, I think, your body needs a certain amount of, liquids, food, nutrients, to just not only function, but also heal. Right. And, when you start limiting that amount of food and, water, I think it begins to take a toll on even just your recovery process in general. Right. And you start to feel weaker and fatigued. And I mean, sometimes your body starts even just kind of like rejecting, the weight cut from that side. Now, there are intelligent ways to cut weight, right? I actually thought I thought in college I cut weight intelligently, because I wasn't taking laxatives. I wasn't running in garbage bags. I would suck weight quick, right? And I would work it off quick. But as I get older, I realized all I had that day was, an apple and, 3 slivers of turkey, turkey breast or something like that, right? Which I look back at, my metabolism was probably getting shot just from, being in shape, but also not really feeding it that much at all. Yeah. And then after a weigh-in, I'd spike up 20, 25 pounds, and I have to cut it again in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your body's saying, feed me, right? And it's going to hold everything as fat when you do that to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So it definitely does take a toll. For example, my junior year, the one I cut from about 180 down to 141, I felt, coincidentally, it actually was my best year in college wrestling. But towards the end of the year, I really started to fall apart, just like physically. I had certain injuries that weren't even that bad, and they just weren't healing that well. I just felt terrible. Like even waking up and going for a run, when you get down that low, your body fat, I remember my body fat being in like the low single digits, where I'd go for a run and I would only I'll go for like a 4 or 5 mile run. I think I would lose like 0.8. Like it was disheartening, because you almost got nothing left to burn. But I remember just my junior year really just falling apart at the end, physically, because I just wasn't giving my body what it needed. And I mean, college wrestling is like a 5-6 month span. I mean, it starts in September and it ends around March when nationals is. So you're not talking about a month or two cutting weight. You're talking about this constant 40-pound, fluctuation almost for 6 months. So yeah, that took a toll. I think that was the biggest year where I saw that difference.
Michael, let me ask you though, why in the world why did you do it? Why do wrestlers do it then? I don't understand. Like, this is my jiu-jitsu mentality now, because I would literally say, peace. Go to the higher weight class.
Yeah.
Is there an advantage behind doing this?
Well, if you ask certain people, they'll have different opinions. I'll give you my opinion, of course. There is an advantage, right? Especially, I'll say it this way. There is an advantage if you do it correctly, right? If you can cut weight, you can maintain your strength, you can maintain your size. Then, in the weight class, obviously everyone will think, wow, this guy's a big 141 pounder, right? He's very well built. He's very well strong. That's a pro side to it, right? The reason I did it and the reason I had to cut was that when I came into college wrestling my freshman year, our team were New England champs that year. And I think we were nationally ranked, I think it was top 15 or top 16, right? So I was coming onto a very well-established team as a freshman. And, I wrestled off and I made varsity and I was a starter my freshman year. But I mean, the weight class above me at the time, or that year, was a New England champion and went to nationals. So I could have went 149, right? But then I would have had to wrestle off Kevin, right? My buddy Kevin. And even if, let's say I beat Kevin or Kevin beat me, end of the day, we're talking about two good wrestlers that shouldn't be wasted as a first and second seed, right? It's like spread them out across. So really, it'd be more of a strategy communication between the coaches and the team members. Like, hey, you should cut this extra weight, go to this weight class, because we want two studs at these weight classes rather than one in both weight classes.
Yeah, so you're referring to what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, is that strategic approach to wrestling, because there's only one spot per division, right? And
Yep.
Once divisions are filled up, that's it. This is the representing team of the school, and the rest of you guys, get some water and you can watch, essentially, right? That's the gist of it.
Yeah, exactly. And there are tournament style tournaments in college wrestling where that you can have second or third seeds wrestle. It could be me and then like the second string, third string also wrestling in the same tournament style bracket, right? Where we could meet if we make the finals. But yeah, typically if we're just going to wrestle another college, or it's like the big show or a big tournament, they're just going to put the number one guy out there. So it's that constant battle of, hey, where am I going to fit in the lineup, and can I beat the starter? So that's the constant struggle.
So let's feed that into the jiu-jitsu world now, because you have experience in both. Mm-hmm. And in jiu-jitsu world, none of that exists. There can be 20 of us going from the same academy in the same division, same age bracket, with the same belt, literally. And it doesn't matter. So why people cut weight in jiu-jitsu? Why that matters? Because the pure factor right now that you just talked about does not exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think folks look at it as the perspective I said before, where, hey, if I can cut weight and maintain my strength and size, I could be a big, middleweight. I could be a big middle heavyweight, right? Mm-hmm. And also, I think it's to also avoid certain people in a school, right? To be honest, I've heard stories, or you see. I mean, for example, right? Let's talk about Atos, right? I mean, Atos is a powerhouse, right? I mean, you see, and I think they actually play, to talk about weight cutting or weight classes in general. I think Atos does a good strategy to win that world title cup at the end of the year for best team, because you see every like Pans or Worlds. Mm-hmm. It's no longer like the top names in the same weight class. You see like, Lucas mm-hmm. Barboza sucking down the heavy, Josh Hincher sucking down a middle heavy or medium. And they kind of play it strategically where they're lining out their best guys per weight class instead of having multiple in the same place. But I think they just do it just for the size factor, right? To cut the most weight and try and maintain that size and strength advantage for a lower weight class.
I understand that. So I understand that part. Strategic approach, and that's similar to wrestling, and especially if you mentioned big camps like Atos. They have so many guys competing at any event. They don't want to meet in finals. They don't, because then they gotta split it, and what fun is that? They all want gold medals, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's a point of achievement there, right? They're going to compete and win. But let's talk about the average Joe Schmo. Let's talk about the local tournaments in jiu-jitsu. Why do people cut weights? Like almost every tournament that I go to, or even you talk to other people, you see at least 1 or 2 or 5 guys running in the bags all around trying to cut the weight right before the weigh-ins. And I get it. They do it. And I know why. But what is your perspective? Doesn't it really matter?
Yeah. I don't think so to some degree, because from when I hear students talk to me about competing, I just think the biggest stereotype, and not to sound repetitive here, but I think the biggest stereotype is just, hey, I want to be a weight class lighter because people are just bigger than me, right? Or, hey, I want to just cut another weight class because people might be stronger than me at the same weight class I am.
But
So
they're not bigger than you. They weigh the same.
I know. But
well, then why do you always hear in boxing and wrestling he's a big 141? Like he's big for a middleweight. There's got to be a reason for it, right?
But I'm playing devil's advocate right now. But you go down weight class, and there will be another guy who's going to be a big 130 pounder. Like it is what it is. If you entering a weight bracket, there will be people who weigh the same amount in jiu-jitsu. Now, I'm not talking about wrestling or professional grappling. Mm-hmm. That's slightly different approach. I'm talking about average Joe Schmo, 90% of the jiu-jitsu population. They go compete. They want to test themselves. Why the weight cutting is so important to some people.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm trying to even think about just even students I have that are hobbyists, right? And they're saying, hey, I'm just going to go out and have a quick competition, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that is probably, of what I mentioned, I feel like that probably is the biggest reason they do so. Or some I've heard say, hey, if I cut a little bit of weight, or if I go down an extra weight class or so, I'll feel a little bit more in shape, or I'll get my cardio up because it'll require me to run more or something like that. I think it's just this false narrative, if that's the right word for it, but like this false narrative, hey, if I jump down a weight class, I'll perform better, or I'll be better, or I'll feel better. I think it's just something that unfortunately is like almost seems like a prerequisite to competing to some.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that might be an excuse?
I mean, I can see that,
right now I'm too heavy. I'm not in the weight bracket that I want to be, so I'm not going to compete. Now I'm leaning this in different direction. Again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I hear this all the time. I want to compete. I just need to drop 70 pounds. Whoa. Come on. Here's Michael's number. Talk to him. I mean, haven't you heard that before?
Oh no, yeah, I totally have. I think to what you're saying, I think that is a crutch to some, where it could be a fear to compete or whatever it is, right? And they say, hey, oh yeah, I want to lose weight first. I got to get in better shape first, or I got to lose some weight before I go compete. Yeah, I definitely I've definitely heard that as a crutch, as an excuse.
Well, I think too, I don't know if this is true, but the casual nature of BJJ tournaments too, you might get bumped up, right? Because there's nobody there in your bracket. It's not as structured.
In a smaller tournament,
in the smaller tournament. So it's like, well, if I'm a girl who's 110 pounds, I want to get under because I might be fighting at 126, right? Which is massive. So I know that plays into it a little bit too. But then I think that also takes you back to what Thomas just said about maybe it's an excuse where like, I'm 110, I'm not going to go because I'm going to fight those 126ers, right? So if I can't get down, I'm just not going to pay my entry fee.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, end of the day, you want to make students successful because that's why, as coaches, that's why we are here, right? We want to provide them the path, clear the path, and provide them the tools for them to succeed. But I do have these conversations, and I hear these conversations often where, especially in the first tournament scenarios, it's my first, I want to try, but I want to go down to the X weight, and until I do, I'm not going to compete. And then like literally 4 years later, they are a purple belt and they was like, I still want to go down to that weight. And I was like, well, what's the definition of insanity, right? You're repeating the same thing over and over. You haven't made any changes. So like, I'm just curious what your thoughts were on this coming from very weight targeted culture of training. Right.
Yeah. And I think also, I think it also be used, flipping the script a little bit. I think it can also be used as an excuse, or you hear it a lot as an excuse sometimes where, if you go against someone and, you hear some people lose, for example, they come off the mat being like, oh, that guy was huge. He probably cut 30 pounds for this. You know what I'm saying? Or, oh, he felt so big, right? That guy must've been a heavyweight down the middle.
He submitted you. No, he wasn't. He submitted you. You got tapped out. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just pissed off half of jiu-jitsu population.
No, I mean, I think you hear from both sides, but no, I mean, you have a great point with that, right? I think that can also be a crutch for folks using that as an excuse to kind of stay out of the realm. But end of the day, competition isn't for everyone. I think there are, lifetime hobbyists in jiu-jitsu, which is totally fine, right? I mean, if you look at any school, I think probably besides Atos, right, who was known as a competition school, or actually I didn't say Atos, I'm sure probably more than 50% of the students are still hobbyists, right? So almost any jiu-jitsu school is going to have a majority of hobbyists, and it's okay not to compete. I know some people use it as the excuse of, hey, I got to get down to weight, whatever. But yeah, I mean, we can't. Everyone can't. I guess use the same excuse.
On a more positive note, if that excuse drives you to becoming more healthy, be losing weight, and give you a goal for the near future for you to enter into the competition, I say go for it. That's more than others do. I mean, yeah, that's a positive view of this entire thing. All I'm gonna say is, as an instructor, be smart about it. If you want to lose 10, 20, whatever X pounds, just be smart about it. Develop a plan over a longer period of time where that impact on your body is not so significant. You can't wake up the day off and say, "Ooh, I gotta run and drop pounds." Like that. I mean, that's not. I wouldn't call that as a smart approach, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean,
yeah, no, you definitely. It's its own science, right? End of the day. For example, this team we used to wrestle every year, Williams. They were a very ritzy school. I mean, it cost probably double our tuition to go there, easy. And they had, nutritionists, they had personal trainers per wrestler, or maybe like the first, 125 to 149 had one nutritionist, then the middleweights and the heavyweights. And these kids, I mean, talk about, almost sound like I'm using the excuse I talk about, but these kids are huge. I mean, I remember when I wrestled one of the 141 pounders, the guy looked like double my size, but of course we weighed the same. But that just goes back to show you how you can intelligently and efficiently cut weight, or you could do it like some people are doing, where you're running in trash bags, cutting 10, 12 pounds the day up, and you feel like crap stepping on the mat.
Yeah. Such an interesting conversation. I could talk about this all day long.
I know. Yeah.
I would actually like to switch it up a little bit though, because I want to know.
We weren't done.
We weren't? All right, then keep going. I'll sit back.
Go on, Gary.
Well, we talked a lot about the mindset, right, of a wrestler and the mindset of BJJ. And I want to know if that mindset is something that you switch on and off. Now, I've seen some tapes of you, and what I've watched, it looks pretty much the same. You're kind of the aggressive in both. But we've also talked to some people that are like, nope, when I'm wrestling, I'm wrestling. And when it's jiu-jitsu, I'll pull guard. I'm working off my back. And I was wondering if there's a switch that you throw depending on what mat you're stepping on.
Yeah, I guess, from the style perspective, as you mentioned, or just pace wise, I don't think I really have a switch when it comes to if I'm wrestling or if I'm doing jiu-jitsu, where my pace is at. I think my pace is very similar. Of course, from the wrestling perspective, there's only one strategy, right? You really can't go on bottom in wrestling. But pace wise, I would say it's the same, and even mentality. But from a jiu-jitsu perspective, I do sometimes like to open up and explore more. Where for example, my younger years and my earlier colored belts perspective, from a jiu-jitsu side, I was very much just a top player, right? I would practice and drill and even work out in the room, in the practice room, working bottom techniques, right? But when it came to your A game and competition, I'd always have that top game as my go-to A game. That's where I want to be. I think as time went on in my career, I kind of transitioned into, hey, I can kind of start working more bottom here and there, and I started to further explore the bottom game. As I got later in my career, but not to go too far off track, but to answer your question, yeah, I just think pace wise, not talking about specific game wise, I think it's the same, wrestling or jiu-jitsu, especially doing it so long, it kind of blends in together now. I don't really think about it as a switch, to be honest with you.
Okay.
As a follow-up to that, do you think that coming from that high dynamic and offensive mindset in wrestling and going into jiu-jitsu, do you think that those individuals have to soften up, if you will, not by choice, but because of what they are entering into, or they continue driving with the very high, strong mindset as they continue exploring? I'm talking about individuals who switch between wrestling from wrestling to jiu-jitsu, right? Do you think that softens up a little bit, or is it not really?
Are you saying like the softening as in like a wrestler walking in and getting completely humbled by,
No. Well, yeah, that's always fun. Yeah, no. We can, no. I'm talking about over a period of time. So let's frame this. You there was one who wrestled for, let's say, 15 years, great achievements from a wrestling perspective. They step on the mat and say, hey, listen, I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu now, right? But their habits are there. The habits are very difficult to revert, right? So they still have this very high, strong physical approach to the game, but they are entering this very soft, gentle, if you will, art where being on the bottom, top, flying around, all that is fine. And actually, you can be submitted from all these weird positions, right? Do you think that their mindset and their approach over time will soften down the kind of, molding into this jiu-jitsu mindset now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think through time, it does. So long story short, short answer, I think yes. I think it can remold per se, and I think they can kind of soften down, but I think it definitely takes time. I think to see and I'm using this off of not really my experience because I started so young doing both, but some of my college friends that I wrestled with, right, teammates have started jiu-jitsu after college wrestling because there was nothing else, and I've seen some kind of struggle with that mindset, right? And I've seen some throughout the years. Like one of my buddies started as a white belt, he's a brown belt now, and his game's totally different. Like the first time he rolled, he was basically trying to kill me. And, as like a white belt going against a brown belt, I think the first time he rolled, and then it was now black belt, and I roll with him when we're brown belts. And I could just feel the difference, right? He was much more calm, much more patient, kind of like, it felt more like a chess match, right? Rather than us just throwing haymakers per se. But yeah, I think through time and through lessons learned and through training and proper guidance and coaching, I think the wrestler can definitely learn to pull back into as they continue progressing and growing in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, because that's always interesting, actually sitting back as an instructor or as a viewer, spectator, and look at those two arts, especially if you have somebody who is with pure wrestling and somebody with skilled jiu-jitsu, they go against each other. And sometimes the winner is not so clear, right? Because they are two different arts, two different strategies, two different goals. But yet the wrestler does not know jiu-jitsu, and the jiu-jitsu guy does not know wrestling. And it's always interesting to see how the dynamics are unfolding there.
Yeah. No, it is very interesting seeing that. And then there's others as on the total opposite side of the spectrum, right? That will sometimes never change, right? And they're always going to go 1,000 miles an hour, right? Regardless if it's their first day of jiu-jitsu or their 10,000th day in jiu-jitsu. But yeah, to what you're saying too, I think what plays a big factor in that, from the wrestling perspective, I think wrestlers are also taught this immense amount, which is funny me saying this out loud, because in jiu-jitsu, you also learn how to control a human being, right? Control the body. But I think wrestling is it's this different nature of learning how to control someone and control their body, where you see wrestlers pouring into jiu-jitsu, and at an early stage, they're able to hang sometimes with blue belts and purple belts per se, right? Just by showing them, maybe one guard pass or, one technique, they can almost hit that on some of the lower belts. Where in jiu-jitsu, you see some jiu-jitsu guys get into wrestling, and sometimes it takes, 10, 15, 20 times more the growth period, vice versa from a wrestler getting into jiu-jitsu.
Do you think that hurts the wrestlers as they enter into jiu-jitsu because they can hang with the blue and purple belts without knowing the skill set that those blue or purple belts have?
So I think it sometimes gives them a false sense of, I don't want to say the word accomplishment. I think it gives them a false sense of skill, right? But then again, right, to play devil's advocate, who, if you win, who might have say it wasn't from skill, right? Or who might have say, hey, that wasn't skill. Yeah, exactly, right? Because that's the whole thing, right? I mean, I think that's a big stereotype, which we can go into eventually, of, oh, hey, he beat me, but he was a wrestler, right? He just wrestled me the whole time. It's like, oh, you lost. So, but it's not. I'm not saying it to stand up to the wrestling community. I'm just saying in general, I think it does provide a false sense to wrestlers sometimes.
Well, yeah, and I suppose that what is important to highlight here is what's the platform, what's the rule set, right? If this is happening in a sparring match at the academy, that's a very different scenario than you going into a competition, into a 6-minute match, and only one hand will go up at the end of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yes, I think it is interesting looking at that because I think I've seen definitely way more, wrestlers come through the many schools I've been to, and they quickly kind of catch on or implement, wrestling strategy into jiu-jitsu, and it works for them to some degree. But as you start getting against the brown and the blacks and the more advanced athletes out there or students, I think then it's a quick exposure to where their weaknesses are.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more and more wrestlers venture into the jiu-jitsu area. I think it's a natural progression, especially that past college, there's really nothing for the wrestler, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're coaching or if you're Olympic level wrestler, I mean, there's really nothing, right? So they need an outlet.
Well, and even with Olympics, we don't know what wrestling future will hold. Like, I don't want to start that controversial topic, but there's a lot of conversations happening there, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's always kind of a threat. I think a few years ago, I think there was that scare about wrestling getting taken out of the Olympics. Petitions left and right, Facebook. I think that probably was the only and first petition I ever signed in my life. I don't like to get into the political stuff, but to your point, that'd be a scary day. Geez, if wrestling is eliminated from the Olympics.
Do you think that jiu-jitsu could replace wrestling at some point?
I like it, Dave. I like them to both be in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean,
that would be cool.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair. I'm just curious. I'm not starting controversy.
Oh, no, I know.
No, I think the rule set's just got to change so much in jiu-jitsu for it to ever be at an Olympic level, because everybody is just doing their own thing still. And,
yeah.
And also just, I think, is it going to pull? Is it going to pull viewers? Is it going to get people in the seats? That's a different thing too, right? So I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever be there.
I think, Gary, you're touching on something very important. I mean, for a general population in the world, for people who do not know what jiu-jitsu is one of the most boring things in the world.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I've seen and watched high-level tournaments.
If you don't understand what is happening, it is boring. It is two guys hugging each other on the ground. I mean, that's all it is. That's why wrestling is so successful. That's why judo is so successful, because it's dynamic. It's very visual. It's very clear to identify winner and loser. It's black and white, and that's what provides entertainment. Olympics is all about entertainment.
Yeah, no, that is very true. That is really funny you said that, though, about how it looks to the outside person doesn't train, because everyone, we all have that one friend that's watching jiu-jitsu over a house one day and they don't even train, and they're like, if I was that guy, I would just stand up. And I'm like,
it's not that easy. Or I'd punch him in the face, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny. Just real quick, I had somebody here watching class. I might have talked about this before, but he was one of those people that said, "Oh, it's not good for self-defense." And and he brought up, I would have elbowed the guy in that position or whatever he said. And I said, would you say that to a college wrestler? Because you could, right? You could elbow him in the face. You could punch him. And he thought for a second. I think it was one of the few people whose minds I've changed, where he was like, yeah, I guess you're right. I didn't think of it that way. And it was nice to see somebody change their perspective on jiu-jitsu a little bit.
Yeah. That's always a funny conversation with folks that don't train. But no, to your point though, initially, I think talking about jiu-jitsu getting on that kind of level, on an Olympic level per se, or more of a mainstream level, I do think you have a point, Thomas, in regards to the excitement and the pace that judo and wrestling do bring compared to jiu-jitsu. So also to Gary's point, there would need to be significant changes, I believe. First off, just being timing or how long a match is. I think one of the most interesting, I'm actually going to forget who ran this. I want to say 5, but I'm not sure if it was 5 grappling promotions. Well, it wasn't too long ago. I think it was a year and a half ago, but they put on I think it was open belt, basically like almost ADCC rules, right? But in gi, and I think it was 4 or 5 minute matches. And the prize was like $25,000 or something like that. And these matches were crazy. I mean, like as soon as the match began, submission only too. So as soon as the match began, I mean, these guys were trying to kill each other, right? That was probably one of the most interesting and most heavily paced tournaments I've ever seen in jiu-jitsu. And I think that kind of shows what mainstream would need if they decide to move forward with that.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part behind any type of presented sport, that it has to bring revenue, and revenue is brought by entertainment. People need to be glued to the screen. And jiu-jitsu, as it stands today, jiu-jitsu needs those adjustments in order for it to be more entertaining to a general population. I want to specify this, right? We all, as three of us will be watching jiu-jitsu, we can talk about the little things that are happening underneath the hood, right? We know what's going on, but the Joe Schmo who's watching for the first time, he won't. So, Michael, so coming from, starting as a Bruce Lee fan, getting through these, early days of wrestling and jiu-jitsu, going through your wrestling career in college, dipping your toes heavily into jiu-jitsu, you have both of the worlds at your fingertips, and now you kind of converting it to a coaching role.
So really that started. Once I graduated college, right, I besides my working life where you get a good job making money, fast forward a few years, I moved out. Literally the boring part. I move out to San Diego, and that's when I start training at Gracie Humaita headquarters, and get into competition again, of course, very heavily. But that's also where I picked up teaching again and started teaching from the on the jiu-jitsu side and wrestling, right, at the school. But even before that, just to make the point, before I moved out, I was coaching a high school wrestling team, and then doing some private lessons on jiu-jitsu and teaching some classes. But when San Diego is when it really got heavy, and I really started focusing a lot of my career on, hey, I gotta teach more and get into this realm of teaching more and growing students, because my goal down the road, which I'm still looking at the next year or so, is to open my own academy and live that dream of being a jiu-jitsu and wrestling coach.
So what are the big lessons that you learned in the past, decade or so, that you would really implement at your own academy that would separate you from majority of the other academies, right? Having the experience from wrestling and then jiu-jitsu. Are you seeking to run both of them at the same time? Are you seeking to run the hybrid concept here? Or there are specific things that you say, this is going in?
So I'm still, regardless, the hybrid or the merge of both is definitely going to happen, right? I'm still deciding and still thinking about, ideally, I would love to have, jiu-jitsu, and then I'm definitely going to have a class dedicated to, wrestling for jiu-jitsu, right? So we can go over more niche of, takedown defense for jiu-jitsu students, but also just having the wrestling classes, right? And that could be middle school, it could be high school, it could be college, but I'm talking about just strictly wrestling, right? Not like jiu-jitsu wrestling. I would love to have all three. I think it really depends on, scheduling and if there will be, help with an assistant instructor. But regardless, bare minimum, there's going to be jiu-jitsu, gi and no gi, and there's going to be a very heavy influence and focus on the wrestling side from an offensive and defensive perspective, because I think, as you both, made clear earlier on, it's no secret. I think that's probably one of the most overlooked things in jiu-jitsu, right? Is that wrestling game, which I think the last 4 or 5, years or so has been becoming a more obvious demand in the market, especially with ADCC. I think it's becoming more clear. Obviously, ADCC has been around forever, but I think the last 2-3 years, I think I've heard them talk about wrestling, or as they like to call wrestle jitsu. I think I heard that word probably more than I have in 20 years of following flow grappling, right? I think it's just becoming more obvious now that you need wrestling for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's that transition into the jiu-jitsu world and bringing wrestling with them to improve the skill set to become a better grappler. Do you think that same thing exists for wrestling itself, for the pure wrestling? Do you think, or have you seen wrestling coaches bringing jiu-jitsu instructors in and saying, hey, listen, there is a benefit to these guys. They're doing something else. Can we improve from our wrestling by bringing jiu-jitsu in?
Personally, I've not seen someone like hire or bring in
I
a
knew you would say
pure.
that.
I've not seen someone bring in like a pure jiu-jitsu guy to increase or add to someone's wrestling. I think wrestling crosses over easier into jiu-jitsu. I think as the hybrid starts, coming through nowadays, you see some jiu-jitsu in wrestling, but I think it's either semi-accidental or it's just not as common, right?
Why
for
not?
example,
But let me ask you, do you think it would benefit? Or am I just crazy?
no, I think there is a benefit, but I think the issue or why it's not. I think wrestling. So let's look at wrestling as a perspective. Your goal is to control and pin your opponent, right? Like literally pin them on the mat, both shoulder blades. If you can't, you win by points, right?
Mm-hmm.
But from a jiu-jitsu perspective, you can pin your opponent in full mount and side mount and Keisagatami, whatever it is. Your goal is to submit them. There's not many. So let's just look at the submission aspect. There's not many. Let's just say if you put your opponent in a submission and don't submit them actually in wrestling, it probably won't be I would think at least half of them wouldn't make sense because that would require you on your back, right? Which you're going to pin yourself in wrestling. Mm-hmm. The other half on top probably aren't great controlling spots because end of the day, let's say if I put my opponent in a armbar or a triangle, all he has to do is roll on top of me and then I'm on my back and I can get pinned and I can lose. You know what I'm saying? And I can't choke him to stop it. So I think a lot of grappling holds or jiu-jitsu holds from a submission perspective don't transition over to the amount of control you need to control someone wrestling.
But what about positions like turtle position? I mean, that's very common in wrestling.
Yes. So
we can talk. We can go over hours of footage and material just from that position on its own.
Yeah. So I think from a perspective of taking out submissions now, looking at jiu-jitsu positions now, pins, holds, for example, turtle. I think turtle is probably one of the best examples that you can use because we're here in a seatbelt position all day in jiu-jitsu, and in wrestling you can't clasp your hands if you're under both armpits, but you can have an over under like that, right? Kind of like a Merkle position. So yeah, I think that translates very well into wrestling as long as you're able to understand how long and safe you could be laying on your own back, right? Because end of the day,
I get that part, but I'm just curious why nobody has ever thought about, hey, let's get this black belt who has decades of experience and something that's very similar, and they are expert in their own division. Let's bring them here. Let's bring them to this college and let's improve. Like I'm just curious why that doesn't happen. There has to be a reason behind it. I'm putting you on a spot here, by the way.
No, it's fine. And I will say a lame political excuse might be, certain colleges and universities have the whole, security thing, right? I mean, even when I coached my first year, I was basically applying to be an assistant coach for the college I wrestled at, right? And they were basically talking about like a certification I had to take and this and that, and they can't allow, like a non-certified coach to come into the room. And I'm thinking this is like the wackiest rule ever, right? Like I literally wrestled for your college. I just graduated. Like I can't coach now without this, piece of paper. But I think that could be one thing from a college perspective. But if you're talking about like a club scene, right, or just a random school where it wouldn't be that political barrier, I mean that's a great point you make, right? I don't think I've ever seen that, and I think that could be beneficial for certain positions or just overall control from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt for wrestlers.
Yeah, I'm not the smoothest guys when I ask questions. I just ask what first thing that comes to my mind. And it's always interesting to talk about these different arts, different disciplines, different sports. We've had, Olympic medalists on the show, judokas and others. And it's always interesting to compare how these other arts fit into jiu-jitsu world and how jiu-jitsu world fits into these other arts. I mean, wrestling is so old as a sport, right? I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years, right? And jiu-jitsu is so young, right? So it's always interesting to make these comparison. Michael, as we kind of wrapping this up, you are doing something cool online, and I want you to briefly talk about this. Because I actually, when we originally start talking about this, and I looked you up, I started Googling, and yes, I Googled you. Your online library, surfaced out, and I started watching some of the videos, and the quality is amazing. Talk about this a little bit. What drove you to start this, and what's your goal behind it?
Yeah, so the reason I started the merge is because I understand and I see the importance of having both arts in your arsenal, right? As I mentioned earlier in the conversation, being able to control the pace and take your opponent down to the ground, and also defend his takedowns. But overall, being able to control the pace from the mat, from your feet down to the mat, and then being able to submit your opponent in any fashion you want. I think if you have all three aspects, you have the takedown game, you have the top game, you have the bottom game. I mean, you really are a dangerous competitor. There's really no, weakness or significant weakness in a specific position. So the reason I started the merge was to kind of show people that wrestling side, show people that jiu-jitsu side, but to get a little bit more niche in the market. Soon after my go live, September 4th or so, I transitioned and made the merge a little bit more specialized and focused on bridging the wrestling gap for jiu-jitsu practitioners. And I think that's huge because any wrestler can walk into a jiu-jitsu school, right? It doesn't matter if he's just average college wrestler or 4-time, NCAA champion. There are crucial and important and critical adjustments you need to make when you're shooting a double leg, when you're shooting a single leg, when you're performing X amount of takedown in jiu-jitsu, right? Anyone could just shoot a crazy double and get guillotined, right? There are things that you need to learn throughout the years of mixing both of these arts together that someone wouldn't know that just wrestled. So not only do you need a wrestler to teach you wrestling for jiu-jitsu, you need someone that's done both arts because they know the pros and cons of implementing X wrestling move in jiu-jitsu.
I think that's brilliant. I truly believe that's brilliant. I think, the value of knowing wrestling for what it is and closing that gap between the two, it's not only beneficial for the wrestlers, but I think it's very important for the jiu-jitsu guys to understand that gap from one defensive perspective, but also from the offensive perspective to understand what's happening and how can we capitalize on these motions, right?
Yeah, and it's been a wonderful run with the merge. I've been truly loving it because end of the day, these episodes that come out weekly, I'm not only showing my techniques, right? Things that I love to use, things that I've used in competition, things I've trained with throughout the years. I'm also breaking down, real, actual live footage from some of the highest rated competitions in the world to regular tournaments that happen every weekend or something like that. So not only are people seeing what I bring to the table as a coach and my experience, but they're also looking at you get an average jiu-jitsu guy and you show maybe like a duck under or a throw by or maybe like one of my episodes was on Yanni Diakmahalos, who's one of my favorite wrestlers, but he's like a wizard in the misdirection. And you show techniques like this and it looks like a different language to them, right? Being able to kind of slowly break that down to them, to show them, hey, this is what you're seeing. This is what's happening. Here's the mechanics behind it. It's just really fun to do that because it's just, as I mentioned, it's just wrestling is just such an overlooked sport in jiu-jitsu. So it really is fun and it really is somewhat of an honor to kind of break it down for certain people and show them because jiu-jitsu folks more than ever are so hungry to learn it now.
Yeah, and we'll most definitely put links to your site, and I encourage anybody who's listening right now to check it out. It is quite done well. Good quality and good material. So I encourage you guys to take a peek at it and see what Michael is doing on his side. Listen, Michael, before we wrap this up, we've been at this for well over an hour. Before we wrap this up, we have 5 questions for you. We didn't tell you about this. This is a little surprise here. 5 questions. We're going to ask you to answer them quickly. First thing that comes to your mind, and always interesting conversation just generates off of that. Gary is going to take a lead on this. Some of them are serious, some of them are funny, but it's always fun.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So you started at a very young age. I don't know if you remember, but what was it like the first time you stepped on the mat?
The first time I stepped on the mat, I remember it being exciting, honestly, because I remember very vividly the image of me, actually almost too vividly. I remember walking to the school with my father, and both the instructors were actually kind of cleaning the windows, and we walked in, and they started talking to my father about jiu-jitsu, and at that point, we checked out a couple schools, and they weren't really what I was looking for. So I was almost kind of like, hey, like, come on, I want to find something to do. So at that point, I was very excited to get on the mat, and it was a fun experience.
All right, cool. Yeah, a lot of people don't have that initial experience of fun and being excited, so that's great. What has been your most rewarding achievement?
On or off the mat?
Yeah. I'll stick with on the mat for this one from a competition perspective. But I think my most rewarding achievement was 2017 at the IBJJF World Championships brown belt for gi. I wound up taking the bronze medal, and I'm always chasing gold, right? Gold medals are cool, but that was my first competition back for from a while of me just kind of training and teaching and not competing. And on top of it, my first Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor, Mike Markulik, that he actually wound up taking the bronze medal at brown belt worlds at the adult level back when he was a brown belt as well. So that was kind of just like a cool little nostalgic thing that we both did that at IBJJF worlds.
No, that's awesome. Like passing the torch a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Over all these, either sport, whatever you want to answer, but have you ever wanted to quit?
No, so I never wanted to quit.
Really?
Wrestling.
When you're cutting 40 pounds, you don't want to quit? Come on.
That would make me quit.
Well, did I want to quit cutting weight? Sure, not wrestling. But, no, I never wanted to quit. I did go through, I think periods and chapters in my life where I needed a substitute or maybe a break, but it was never a break from actually training. It was a break from like, hey, maybe I won't do a competition for the next few months and just kind of train and just have fun and roll and just expand my game a little bit more and work on my weaknesses. I never wanted to quit. It was more of just like hey, I'm either competing right now, every month, or let me just hang back and just train the next 2-3 months, see what happens.
No, makes sense. All right. Describe your feelings when you received your black belt.
Oh geez. Yeah. I mean, great. All positive feelings. I think the only mixed emotion I had was that the instructor I'm talking about, Mike Markulik, I mean, he was a very influential person to me. I mean, I trained under him for probably 10 years or so, or close to it, before I moved away. He actually wound up passing away in a motor vehicle accident around I think it was 2015. So that's also why the brown belt achievement felt so great for me. But I think with the black belt thing, it was kind of a more like definitely 99% positive. I think there was that 1% of bitter, thinking like, oh, this would be great if Mike kind of saw me get this far
with you.
Yeah. But no, I mean, overall, it was great. I mean, I was really excited. I was ecstatic. So it was all positive vibes.
Awesome. All right. And then here's the last one. Do you wash your belt?
I wash my belt. Yeah. I know I can get a little, I know some folks like to wash it, right? Because they think all the skill wash away, or the stripe scenario, the stripes coming up. But no, I wash my belt. End of the day, I look at the belt as, it's fabric, it's a gi, it's just like a t-shirt or underwear or anything else. Like, it gets dirty, it gets stinky. And I wash it.
I don't like to think of it as underwear, but everything else I'll agree with.
Not from a value perspective, but just in regards to clothes. Yeah.
Great way to finish this up.
Sure.
Michael, what a great conversation. Thank you for sharing all the knowledge, all the thoughts, all the stories with us. Before we wrap this up for today, where can people find you? Social media, websites? Please share. We'll include everything in the notes of the episode, but mention anything you like at this point. We're going to find you.
So my website is themergeonline.com. My Instagram, where you could follow, is themerge.online. And my Facebook page, you can just search my name, Michael Trasso, and it's linked up to the page, which is The Merge, the wrestling guide for jiu-jitsu. So.
All right.
Outstanding. Well, once again, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for sharing your stories. Thanks for sharing your journey with us. And if you are ever in Chicago area, make sure you stop by RŌL Academy. We are always here. We would love to have you. I would love to put up a wrestling seminar or a merge seminar.
Do the merge.
Yeah.
Do the merge.
You see what I did there? See what I did?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. We're done. Whoa, hold on. Actually, we are not done. We've got something exciting.
So this is it.
This is
Gary?
it. This is the big day, right? The first giveaway for the Fuji gi. I'm excited. I hope the listeners are excited too.
I'm pretty stoked about this. So before we get to this, let's talk about what's the percentages, how this answer yes or no, whether you wash or you do not wash your belt stands at this point. So we have about 56% of the listeners, and there was an enormous amount of votes casted, do not wash their belt, and about 44% do wash their belt. If we look at that percentage split between our guests, 67% right now do not, and 33 do. So this is really unfolding in a very interesting dynamic here.
Yeah, there's a lot of gross belts out there.
There's a lot of gross belts out there, and there's a lot of
think about that.
There are some squeaky clean belts out there. So listen, this is all fun. This is all fun. But how is this? How are we going to do this?
I believe you have a roulette wheel you're going to spin, and we'll pick that number, and we'll say their name. That person will have until midnight, which will 11:59 Friday night, to claim their prize Central Time from the release of the podcast. That'll be 72 hours. So this will be released on Wednesday. They'll have till 11:59 on Friday to claim their prize. Give us all your pertinent information so that we can get that gi sent directly to you.
So specifically, we will shoot you out an email, whoever the winner is. You need to respond to us within that 72 hours, and we'll connect you with our partners at Fuji, and free gi is on the way to your place. So shall we do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Spin the wheel. Here we go.
All right, let's take a look here. Let me get this random thing going, and boom. I have the answer, and let me quickly find the person. Little drum. I need a drum. Where's the drum? Where's the drum? Oh, you know what? I have email address, and I don't know how. Then there's no name. They do not.
What do you mean there's no name?
Hold on a second.
Is it all numbers?
Yeah, it's all right. I'll give out the partial email address. I don't want to give out the whole thing. That would not be fair. But if your email address starts with KSTASU and goes on, you are the winner. We will we fire out an email to you shortly, and you will find out that you are the actual winner. And then remember, you have only 72 hours to respond back to us to claim the prize, and the free gi of your choice will be on the way to your house. So one more time, KSTASU ... If that's how your email address starts, you are the winner this month, in the month of January, for the Fuji giveaway at RŌL Radio.
All right, hit us up. You got till midnight Friday night, right? 11:59 p.m. Central Time, and everything will be on its way to you. So super exciting, and we'll be doing another one of these next month.
So this is an important part, right? So we will be doing these every single month. So if you did not were the lucky winner, you can still be part of this. You need to cast your vote. If you already casted your vote, you don't have to do it again. We have you in the database. Life is good. But if you haven't, you want to jump in on this, please do it right now. Gary, what's the link?
TheRollRadio.com/belt. TheRollRadio.com/belt.
Gary, is that email address yours?
No, why would it
be? Are you secretly trying to hijack?
No, I've got smarter ways of cheating and getting more
All right. This is it for this one.
Cool. Yes. We'll see you next month.
Lucky winners here.
Later. Keep listening.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.